I always hear the complaint that a 40 megapixel sensor, it isn't sufficient if you don't have a lens that will resolve the 40 megapixel sensor of your Fujifilm camera. And I want to share with you my thoughts about using a 40 megapixel sensor for over 2 years plus and what are my results with lenses that are resolving the 40 megapixel sensor of the Fujifilm cameras or with lenses that don't resolve the 40 megapixel sensor. Is the 40 megapixel sensor of any help, or should we go back to the old 26 megapixel sensor? I have here Fujifilm X-T5 with the 35mm f1.4 magic lens from Fujifilm. And we know that this lens doesn't resolve the 40 megapixel sensor. It's not even on the list of Fujifilm lenses that are resolving the 40 megapixel sensor. On the other hand, I have here the 18mm f2, also a lens that doesn't resolve for sure the 40 megapixel sensor, and it's very important, this lens, when we'll talk about the end results for normal photographer, but let's say also for pro, semi-pro photographers. The next lens that I have and used a lot, it is the 18mm f1.4, a lens that is resolving the 40 megapixel sensor without problems. Other lenses that I have and are resolving the 40 megapixel sensors are the 35mm f2, the Voigtland 27mm f2, and the macro lens from Fujifilm, the 30mm f2.8. So all are great lenses, no problems. And I also have here Fujifilm X106 that it seems the lens doesn't fully resolve the 40 megapixel sensor from time to time. It depends, I must use it more, but lots of people are agreeing that the lens doesn't fully resolve the 40 megapixel sensor, or I would say it's resolving the 40 megapixel sensor of X106 as the 27mm f2.8 Fujifilm lens. That Fujifilm lens is on the list of lenses that are resolving the 40 megapixel sensor, the Mark II lens. But I am not liking it very much at pixel level, and also this lens is not one of the greatest Fujifilm lenses, they are pancake lenses. So anyway, moving to the next idea. I've used lenses that are resolving the 40 megapixel sensor, I've used lenses that aren't resolving the 40 megapixel sensor, and I also use these lenses on a 26 megapixel sensor from Fujifilm. So what is my opinion in the end after years and years of using these lenses, of pixel peeping, of printing, of editing, of doing lots of stuff with these cameras? What is my opinion? Does it helps the 40 megapixel sensor, the lens? Do we have better image quality on a 40 megapixel sensor camera or not? Before answering this question, I must address also the XH2S or XS20 cameras that have the old 26 megapixel sensor that is tweaked with the new colors and the new tonalities from Fujifilm. So when you look online at a 40 megapixel sensor and at a 26 megapixel sensor latest generation, you'll not be able to observe without zooming in lots of differences. But if you zoom in, you'll observe that the 40 megapixel sensor, it is more sharp. Also, if you have experience in these files, you'll be able to observe that you'll have like 10, 15, 20 better image quality on the 40 megapixel sensor depending on the lens and on the light. So personally, I'm able to observe these differences. So my conclusion regarding the 40 megapixel sensor is that yes, the 40 megapixel sensor is helping the lens to look very good. So the 40 megapixel sensor, it's improving the image quality of the lens, even if at the pixel level we could say that the lens doesn't resolve the 40 megapixel sensor. And looking at those files and at those tonalities and at that sharpness, my conclusion is that you will win at least 20% improvement in image quality. So the IBIS and the 40 megapixel sensor that it's way sharper than the X Pro 3 sensor, it's bringing better image quality to your files. It's almost like full frame. I never said that X Pro 3 is giving me full frame like image quality, but the 40 megapixel sensor, from the moment I was able to see what it can do my opinion changed, and I've always said for at least 2 years that the 40 megapixel sensor is rendering full frame like images. So the quality, it's almost like full frame. You have those tonalities. And I've also observed like a Sony full frame shooter, when I've shot Sony a7R3A, so a 47 megapixel full frame camera, compared to Sony a7C, I've observed that the files were sharper, the tonalities were better, and so on. So the image quality on a bigger sensor, even if you use a lens that doesn't resolve the 40 megapixel sensor, it is better. So that obsession that the lens must resolve at pixel level the 40 megapixel sensor, it is wrong, because you will win better image quality in the end with an older lens. You'll get the most juice out of that lens, because when you look at the pictures on a big screen, you can export that image downsized, but you'll have a better image quality because you'll reduce a bigger file to a smaller file, and you'll have better color, better tonalities, better sharpness, more details and fine details that are there, even if the lens doesn't resolve the 40 megapixel sensor at pixel level. So the 40 megapixel sensor, it's a big deal, and this is why I'm saying I want the 40 megapixel sensor on all the Fujifilm cameras. If you will not use the 40 megapixel sensor, from my point of view, for my eyes, you lose around 15 to 20% image quality. You lose a lot of image quality. I'm not impressed now at all regarding the 26 megapixel sensor, and especially the old one that it's not tweaked. I'm liking how it's rendering, and I will keep it just for the nostalgic look or just for remembering that look. But the 40 megapixel sensor with the IBIS, with any Fujifilm lens, will help you have better image quality. So this is why I'm saying the 20 megapixel sensor of a micro four thirds camera is not enough. A bigger sensor is proving to me that I will have better image quality. If I will use a bigger sensor on a full frame camera, yes, better image quality than a 24 megapixel sensor when I'm downsizing the images and when I'm looking at the images entirely or at the pixel level. Just one camera, I can say, or two if I'm thinking now, I could say that yes, they've given me a different image quality and a better one compared to these high resolution sensors. And that camera, it is Sony a7S. The 12 megapixel sensor of the Sony a7S was crazy good. The images were looking like a medium format sensor, and I'm not the only one that is saying that. The image quality from Sony a7S was another beast compared to a 24 megapixel sensor compared to a 60 megapixel sensor. The sharpness, the details, and all what was there, it was amazing, amazing. But of course, you were limited at 12 megapixel sensor. And talking about 12 megapixel sensors, yes, I'm remembering just right now when I'm talking about X100 Fine Pix. That X100 Fine Pix had, I think, 12 megapixel sensor, and yes, the files were looking nice, very nice, but again, you couldn't zoom in because it was just a 12 megapixel sensor. So regarding the image quality of a smaller sensor, I feel that if you want that bigger pixels, you can find them just on Sony a7S. Yes, the image quality of those big pixels, another discussion. But other than that, a bigger sensor with a bigger resolution will give you better image quality indifferently of the lenses that we'll use. So lenses that are resolving or lenses that aren't resolving the 40 megapixel sensor. But now the discussion could go in the other way. Will a lens that is resolving the 40 megapixel sensor put on a 24 megapixel sensor will give you the same results on the 24 megapixel sensor? I feel that yes, if you will use lenses that have plenty of resolution, like Voigtlander f2 lens, like 80mm f1.4, like 30mm f2.8, like Yongnuo 50mm f1.8, yes, you'll have better image quality on the smaller sensor, but not better than the 40 megapixel sensor. Equivalent, in a way. Of course, at pixel level, it will not be so sharp and it will not look so good. But entirely, you'll be pretty close. But when you'll use a lens like 80mm f2 on a 26 megapixel sensor, you'll have an image that when you'll compare it, how the image it will look on the 40 megapixel sensor, you'll have an image that it's not so good looking like this lens it's rendering on the 40 megapixel sensor. Also, this is true for the 35mm f1.4 lens and other lenses. So if you want the best image quality from your older Fujifilm lenses, I would advise, yes, use a Fujifilm camera with a 40 megapixel sensor. You can set the JPEGs to medium and shoot just JPEGs, or take the raw files and export them at a smaller size. But the image quality, it will be at least 20% better from my point of view, at least 20% better. So this is why when you have a 40 megapixel sensor, you really don't need to think to get just lenses that are resolving the 40 megapixel sensor. This isn't the idea. The 40 megapixel sensor will improve image quality with all the lenses that you have. So this is why you don't need to buy lenses that will resolve the 40 megapixel sensor. Any lens will benefit from the 40 megapixel sensor a lot. And I'm saying this, how I've said, after using this 40 megapixel sensor for over 2+ years. So yes, get any lens in the Fujifilm system or in other system, because the advice it is also suited for Sony full frame shooters. A bigger sensor, from my experience, it will give you better image quality in the end. When you look at the files at the pixel level, you'll be astounded with lenses that are resolving the 40 megapixel sensor or the 47 or the 60 megapixel sensor. So anyway, you don't lose anything with a bigger sensor. Of course, I feel that the 60 megapixel sensor could be overkill for low light street photography, because with a bigger sensor you need to raise the shutter speed. But this is where Fujifilm is winning it, and let me keep the discussion just at Fujifilm. You have IBIS that is working. On Sony, the IBIS is not at the level of the Fujifilm cameras. It's not. So you have here IBIS that is doing miracles with the 40 megapixel sensor. You'll have nothing to lose. You'll just win image quality plus image quality with any Fujifilm lens. So yes, I'm a totally big fan of the 40 megapixel sensor. I don't care that it takes more files in my computer. I can delete the bad pictures and keep the good ones. Because yes, better image quality, full frame like image quality, I'm not feeling any constraint when shooting a 40 megapixel sensor Fujifilm camera. So in conclusion, I'm a big fan of the 40 megapixel sensor because yes, in practice, I've got better image quality and I don't feel the need to go to full frame. This is why I'm always putting my hand on Fujifilm. It's offering me all I need and that extra image quality compared to the old Fujifilm sensor. So this 40 megapixel sensor, it's a great, amazing sensor that I totally recommend. So if you are liking content like this, please subscribe now to my channel, use my affiliate links. If you want to buy something from the gear that I'm using, subscribe to my newsletter for more photography tips and tricks, share my videos, leave me your comments, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.